I want to first just say thank you so much for joining us tonight, everyone. Whether you're members of the public or you've been with us before and joined our meetings, or you're task force members or staff, we appreciate your time. So I've got a lot to go over with us before we get started with introductions and then into the discussion. So I'm just going to ask that people be patient with me as I go through kind of this beginning part, just to give us some background and some information to start our conversation, okay? So the task force is a little bit of overview on the task force. The Minnesota Sustainable Foraging Task Force was established in 2025 to gather and review data and information, including traditional ecological knowledge on the impacts of foraging on species, resilience, ecosystem health, and other aspects of Minnesota's diverse biomes. Maybe I can read it on the screen if it's big enough. There we go. Review existing regulations governing foraging activities on state lands. Also develop recommendations for science-based, including traditional ecological knowledge, foraging guidelines for state lands that balances public access and foraging opportunities with conservation needs. The recommendations must be in the form of draft, statutory, or rule language and must be consistent with Indigenous and other cultural practices and traditions. We're also to develop recommendations for increasing public understanding of sustainable foraging practices that include safety and ecological considerations, solicitate public input when appropriate, kind of what we're doing today, develop recommendations for reduced price foraging permits. Okay, next slide. And so our report is due February 28th, 2026, and it's going to be submitted to the DNR Commissioner and relevant legislative committees. Recommendations must be specific and actionable, and the report must detail the proposal for changes or additions to statute or rules to effectuate the task force recommendations. The task force does expire March 15th, 2026, and we got started in September of this year. We do have 18 members on the task force. We're very lucky that we've got a very diverse group of people from all different types of expertise and work in their roles, and then also members of the public as well, and then staff members from the DNR, legislators like myself. So we've got a really good group of stakeholders at the table to talk about foraging. And I'd like to take this opportunity to just introduce myself as well, and then ask members of the task force if you would go first and introduce yourselves. And then, because it doesn't look like there's a ton of us online, if you wouldn't mind, I would ask that those who are joining us from the public, if you could also introduce yourself to your name, what brought you to today, and a little bit about yourself would be great. So I'll start out with myself, and then I'll just go down this line. I'll call out people, okay? So Senator Susan Pa, I represent Senate District 38, which is Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Osseo. And I chair the Sustainable Foraging Task Force. And I'm also the chief author that brought about this task force as well. And then I'll go ahead and call on, why don't we go ahead and just go to staff? Can we start with you first, Jennifer?
Yes, happy to introduce myself. Sorry, it took me a minute to find my unmute. Good evening, everybody. Jennifer Hawkins. I am a consultant with Management Analysis and Development. We are a division within Minnesota Management and Budget, and we are supporting the work of the task force. So I'm happy to be here tonight.
Thank you, Jennifer. Nick.
And I'm Nick Nero. I'm an LCC staff, and I'm a nonpartisan researcher, also supporting the task force.
Thanks, Nick. And then let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and go to members. Peter. It's funny, we have Peter twice on here.
Hey, Yes, in the process of switching
Okay, great.
my connection. I'm Peter Martignaco. I'm on the task force, and I'm the representative of the Minnesota Mycological Society. So, welcome everyone.
Thank you, Peter. Nibi.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here. Nibi Ogichida Ikwe, representing Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nibi. Gary.
Hello, everyone. Gary Wyatt. I'm extension educator on our forestry team. I teach agroforestry and invasive species, and actually have taught different classes on foraging around the state with our local extension educators with the University of Minnesota Extension. So I have an interest in foraging myself. So I'm glad I'm on the committee, and well, it's a wonderful committee to work with. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, so I'm going to go to members of the public now. Alan.
Yeah, hi, my name is Alan Tucholowski. You're probably familiar with me by now. I think I've logged on to every one of these listening sessions. Thank you so much for being here, especially outside of working hours. Yeah, I'm a lifelong forager. I rely on public land to do most of my foraging, so I've been following the work of the task force pretty closely. Um, yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us again, Alan. And then I've got Layla or Leia. I might have said it wrong.
Yeah, happy to watch today. Yeah, Leia. Always I think of Star Wars. That tends to help people remember my name.
Ah,
I am here on behalf of the Minnesota Foraging Alliance, and I am a forager myself. I am a renter of an apartment and so don't own any land and really rely on public land to be able to, live the lifestyle that I live in harvesting plants and medicine for food for myself and for my community. I also dabble a little bit in herbalism. So it's not just nuts and berries, but also plants and foliage as well. So I suppose I can leave it at that. Last time I had shared a little bit of my vision for what I would hope foraging would look like in the next 5 years. And I know that I have many members that wanted to be here tonight and couldn't, and are also sending in written comments. So there should be a bunch of those coming your way, Nick, this weekend.
thank you, Leia. And then I've got someone on iPhone. So if you're able to unmute and speak, that would be great. I don't see a name, but I know it's on an iPhone, it says.
What is it? Okay. I am not on an iPhone.
Okay, so Lisa, go ahead.
All right. I can't see any, I
Or
can see
no, I don't.
you, but
Okay, great.
that's just bear with me. All right. So my name is Lise Wolf, and I've been actually a practicing herbalist for 32 years. I have foraged during a great deal of that time. And I am very careful ethically about how to handle the land and make sure it's sustainable and that the plants and the land are treated well. I also teach quite a few classes. I teach a year-long program, and I train the students basically how to forage for medicine. And the medicine that I prefer are what people perceive as weeds. Minnesota is a generous place in terms of its lands, tremendous amounts of greenery. And so over those 32 years, I've been very careful. I mean, there's a lot of ethical guidelines my students learn, and very much about harvesting very small quantities and being very careful to look like you've never been there, to not leave the place, to give the plants things when they harvest, water, clip dead branches, think to thin the patches, rather than just take for yourself. that said, over these years, and particularly recently, remember, I've been harvesting for about 35 years myself, and with sometimes groups of 20 students for the last 30 years. And I have noticed that more people are foraging. Minneapolis has put in a lot of fruit trees, and that has been terrific. And I often find those fruit trees bear a fruit, that people have come already and you can see their footprints everywhere. However, I will say they have not hurt the trees. Nothing looks damaged. It just looks trampled. So they haven't heard it, but they have not been thoughtful about making sure there's fruit and, well, certainly fruit, because that's really what people seem to understand to harvest at this point. But I've also heard teachers talking about how much they harvest, really not thinking about other people harvesting, other animals, leaving for others, and sustainability. Again, we have tremendous volumes of greenery in the Twin Cities and beyond. And so, what I would like to see, if there are guidelines, well, basically, if there's anything that happens going forward around foraging, is that there is either a video or written document that people have to view, that has very careful guidelines around sustainable harvest and ethical harvest. That is really my concern. That, yeah, they are aware of that, because people are often by themselves, and it's kind of consumer culture goes into nature, where you get as much as you can, but you're really not thinking, how much do you actually need, and how much do other people need, and how much do the animals around them need, and how much does nature need to continue to photosynthesize and do the right thing. So anyway, that's I guess my main point, and I would be very happy to participate in working through ethical guidelines. I teach it regularly, so I have quite a bit to say. So anyway, I hope that is helpful.
That is very helpful, Lacey. And I actually have a question for you later when
Sure.
we get into, because you touched on something that we were just talking about today. I'd love to get your input on that, since since you bring groups of people, of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got, let's see, we're doing introductions. So those who are joining us, just letting you know, we're going around and doing introductions. I have Nengva.
Yes, uh, I'm here. It's nice to be one of your audience. I'm here to listen. But we're talking about forage and I'm interested in that too. So, well, thank you.
Thank you. And then if I missed anyone else, right now is the time. If I did miss you and you have not introduced yourself, go ahead and take this time to do so. Okay, not seeing anyone, we'll go ahead and get started. I do have a little bit more information to give to all of you before we get started in the robust discussion. So this is actually the last listening session to a number of 5 listening sessions we've already had. And this will be our last listening session, but not the last time that you can give input. We do have public comment at all of our task force meeting. We make time for that. So if you ever want to also join us for our task force meeting and give input, you can do so that way. You can also email us as well with any input and follow-up. You can also track us or kind of monitor, follow our work of the task force by going to the LCC website. And I think we do have a link to that. Maybe I'll ask Nick to put that into the chat so everybody has that. But thank you everyone for joining us for our last listening session. For this listening session, I just want to go over a little bit of logistics here in some format for you. There's not a ton of us. We just want to, if there was a lot of people, we just want to make sure that people are taking space, but they're also creating space for others as well. So we're saying a limit of 3 minutes, but you can go a little bit over because it's not too many of us here today. And feel free to do that. Those who have signed up in advance, you'll be called on first to speak. If anyone would like to speak, just raise your hand. And if I miss you, or you're not able to raise your hand because of the way that you joined us, then just go ahead and speak up and so that we know. We ask that people just use respectful language, that we may disagree on certain things, but we can also express it in a respectful way. So just be mindful. And then for online sessions, whenever you can, and as you feel comfortable, if you can turn your camera on when you speak, that would be ideal. If you are not comfortable doing that, it's okay to be off camera as well. Listening sessions are recorded, so just letting you know that, and it will be posted on our task force website. And then we're going to dive right into the discussion and hearing from all of you. On your screen here is a list of just discussion prompts, some questions that we love to hear from the public on, love to get your insight and input on any number of these questions here. And also feel free to give any input or experiences that you've had that's outside of these questions. So it doesn't have to be just this, but this is just a starting point for us to get us thinking and talking. And so with that, I'd like to ask and see if, Nick, are you aware of anyone that might have signed up ahead of time to speak or to say something before we open it
I
up to
don't
others?
believe so, but we have a pretty small group. So
Okay.
if I missed you, feel free to talk away.
Great. So I've got a few things that I'm interested in learning from all of you, but before I get started on those questions, I'd love to just kind of open it up to see if anybody has anything they like to share with this group, whether it's just your experience, what brought you here that is really burning for you, or and just anything you'd like to share before we get into kind of some of the questions. Okay. I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to go to that question I had for Lise before. And Lise, you brought up something really important that we actually talked about today, which is when you're bringing a group of people and maybe to a state park or state forest, and whether it's for educational purposes or exploring, or maybe you're teaching them how to harvest sustainably. And what we were talking about, should there be a permit that's required, even if it's at no cost, for large groups? Or a notification system of some sort. So it isn't, even if they don't apply for a permit, should they notify the park that they're going to be coming in a large group? And what would we consider a large group, or what would we consider a small enough group that no permitting, no notification needs to happen? And so that's something we were kind of just talking through today without any recommendation either way. But I'd love to kind of get your take on that since you've been out with groups. Do you think that that would be a bear challenge, or do you think that that's fair to ask that? Because sometimes park rangers go out and they don't anticipate a big group coming through, and they're kind of wondering what you're doing, and just like and if they knew ahead of time that a group was going to be there, it'd just be like, hi, I already know why you guys are here. And so we're thinking, does 20 and under seem reasonable to not even notify? Or should we say 10? Or what's the number? Or should there be a number? Just all of that. I'd love to get everybody's take on it too, but since Lise brought it up, I thought maybe she could kind of give us some idea.
Well, it's an interesting question, because I don't know how many other people are taking 20 groups of 20 out, although I bet the Mycological Association is doing things like that. It's interesting because, not all land is, public land that we go on. And who do we notify? Because that also becomes questions, right? I think the idea of having a permit, again, free or not, is actually it. I have historically not liked the idea of permitting, but honestly, I think if it is, a permit to educate, to make sure that they've gone through a little bit of education around guidelines of, appropriate harvest. I think a permit, I would not be unhappy with permitting, not at all. Again, I think the question becomes, it will become unclear to the person who has to notify someone, unless it's obvious. They're going to a particular state park and they know that they should inform the ranger as they're entering. That would make sense. Actually, that would be simple. But there are a lot of places, for example, in the Twin Cities, I live near Lake Nokomis. I don't know if would that be Hennepin County? Would that be Minneapolis Park and Rec? Do I have to go over to Nokomis Rec Center and say hi to the person at the front desk? I mean, it's not clear when that gets kind of tricky. So the notification is less interesting. I think it's almost more you would have to notify the park people that this is legal when people go and forage, but you do want to make sure they have a license and you're not punishing them for not having a license, but you're informing them that it's legal, but they need to have a license. And it's really just for education to make sure that it becomes, that is a sustainable situation for the parks and the people who come to to enjoy the parks for all sorts of reasons. And so I think that the permit itself is more the important part, so that they have some guidelines around what they're doing. And yeah, but again, I think it's more for the park employees to be informed that there is a permit and what the permit's purpose is. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that is helpful. Absolutely. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the Mycological Society, we have special research permits that we get from the Department of Natural Resources to do our educational and um, diversity surveys at the state parks when we go there. Generally, when we do go to other land types, uh, we there hasn't really been any permitting process, um, whether it be state forest or wildlife management areas or stuff like that. At the same time, we've not um, literally not had anybody even, I mean, from the people that are managing those land managers, we've never even been contacted while we're in the field or otherwise about, our activities there. We uh, we don't move through the environment in real large groups regardless. I mean, we may come with the total number of people that are there, maybe 30 people or 35 people, but we don't stay as a single group. We divide ourselves into the landscape, um, to group to, I mean, the requirements with the state parks, I believe, can't remember exactly. It's either they want us to keep groups smaller than, I believe, 12, uh, going in any one area. So generally that would be off trail. And quite honestly, when we're in the state parks, we're usually, the groups that we are moving with, of 10, 12 people, are going on trails. And a number of people hardly ever leave the, don't even leave the trail. So they're not really going into areas that would create off trail type or be part of off trail concerns. I had a question for Lise though. Uh, do you forage herbs on public lands?
Um, I a little bit I still do, but I've been practicing for so long. And again, I harvest my whole pharmacy wild primarily. I'm not a gardener.
Huh.
But what I've encouraged my students over the years, I tell them I'm teaching them how to fish. I'm not trying to give them a bunch of fish. And so I don't want them to get into the habit of coming back to Lake Nokomis to find their blue vervain. I want them to find other places. Again, scatter it. Don't harvest heavily in one area that you become familiar
Absolutely.
with. And so, what I encourage the students to do is to make friends because even though I don't own land, so many people do. They have a cabin. They have, a lot of my clients live in rural areas. They're CSAs. And because I'm teaching about the weeds, all of those places have weeds. And I encourage my students to teach as well. And that's actually, offer to teach them about the weeds on their land in order, in exchange for being able to harvest those weeds. And weeds can be, tricky, right? Because sometimes weeds are native weeds, things like Monarda fistulosa, for example. But again, small quantities, so it's, yeah, but that's how I work it. I primarily, but sometimes I still harvest on public land, but I also keep an eye out for um, if it's a good year for a plant, there's a lot of it, then I feel more comfortable, bringing my students out. But if it's, oftentimes I'm still looking from, if a student has land, we go to their place, instead of using public lands, just because, again, give it a break. Don't always, rely on a certain area. I mean, that makes sense, right? In terms of sustainability. So.
I appreciate that answer, and I'm not, trying to trap you or anything
No,
because
and I don't mind. When I was a
but
younger herbalist, I was much more oops, the recording stopped. You're all still there though?
Yeah, we're still here.
Thanks for keeping my anonymity. Anyway, when I was a younger herbalist, I was more reliant on the folks who have said, I don't own land. I have to, this is the only place I can. But I learned, again, so many people were so excited about, because I would share the information I was learning, they would offer their land. And that is, I encourage people to have those relationships because, again, weeds grow everywhere. And, then it becomes a nice relationship because they appreciate your taking those plants, nipping them at their house. And, you don't have to use the public lands. So, yeah.
I totally am excited and supportive of people making, building relationships
Mhm.
with others that uh, own private land so they can learn and build those relationships. One of the reasons that the task force was established is that if you're harvesting anything on public lands that is plant-based, you're technically breaking the law.
I know. I do know that.
I'm sure you're aware of that, and
Yep. Yep.
that's part of why we're all here
Yep.
to have this conversation because the it isn't about taking a little or taking being sustainable. It's under the current structure, it's not allowed at all
I know.
in most cases, and that's a that's a structure that I think really has never taken, foraging into consideration as a acceptable outdoor pursuit. And as you bring up, there's more people out there interested in doing it and wanting to learn about it. And we've talked extensively about the need for education, and that's really important for responsible harvest and ethical harvest and an appropriate harvest. And there's a bunch of different things. And as you clearly understand too, I mean, when we're talking about public land, we're talking about sharing the resource not only with other people that forage, but other public land users,
Yep.
whether they harvest it or not,
Yes.
as well as whatever utilization that wildlife depends on.
Yep.
So
Yep.
all those things are really important to consider. I really thank you for coming and sharing your experiences and knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to stay as a resource for whatever pieces might be useful because, again, I've watched the evolution of this. I've watched it before it was cool. And now that it's cool, I've seen how much more popular it is. And I would love to participate around that in whatever way is useful for folks. So, thank you.
Thank you. Leah, I saw your hand go up and then it went back down. Did you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I would like to speak to a little, Senator Fa. You had asked about this large group foraging permit concept, right? I will admit I am a trained research scientist, so I love data. And so I am much more interested in the concept of using a permitting system to gather data. Because if you have a group of people who's going out for education, it'd be really helpful to know, like, that there's these 20 people that know nothing that now have just been expanded to this outdoor pursuit, right? That like before they would not go to public land to learn about these things. They might not even be going to a state park at all. But because of being in this group and feeling that community and that capacity being held together, they're now visiting. And so I don't have a solid answer as far as whether there should or shouldn't be a permit, but I think that the task force should consider those things of when you're developing a permitting system, like really being thoughtful and using that to collect and gather data and how we can help, manage both the education side of it as well as managing the land and the natural resource side. Because a lot of these foraging classes, like Lise mentioned, aren't actually gathering things, right? You're educating on plant ID and things like that. And so keeping that in consideration.
Yeah, thank you. Lise.
It comes back to, again, Leah, to your point, I think it's actually a very good point. And again, the scatteredness of who owns what particular land. If there is a license, again, making it very clear that it is not illegal, they're not doing anything wrong, people will be more comfortable, telling what they're often doing. But I also wonder then if the place to actually tell that you're going foraging is actually more a central location that isn't the front office of Acton State Park, but somewhere on the computer or website where you just register that one person has gone with the intention of harvesting plantain, at Acton State Park, period. And you just let them know, period, done. And that would gather your data without, again, the confusion of who owns that particular piece of land and who should be, told, really. I don't know, my opinion. So there you go. That's it. Thank
I've
you.
certainly seen that done successfully I used to work for a tribal nation and we had resources like that, community story maps on GIS platforms that were available on your mobile device, right? So you could pull up the land that you were at and you could plug in your location and you could say the plant that you found and that you were foraging and that you were harvesting. We would also have them plug in information about invasive species that they were seeing. And so it was a really great way to kind of have this community data collection process that ultimately, as the land managers, they then managed that GIS map and took that data back and kind of synthesized it and utilized it, right? But I do think that it would be remiss to issue a permitting system and not actually use all these boots on the ground to like help gather some of this information and some of this data.
Yeah, I know. We can ask people to volunteer to join and be able to also contribute that information. And I agree that if there's not necessarily, I think the barrier would be how easy would it be? And if we could make it more instant, kind of like what Lisa was saying, if you can go online and you say, I'm gonna be with a group, we're gonna be in this area, maybe a group of 10, 12, 15, whatever, and we're gonna be in this area for educational purposes, then, and it automatically just shoots back that says, we received it and you're fine, you know, and so you're not waiting like weeks to try and get permission or some kind of permit to go out with that group. But if you can at least get something back fairly quickly, I think it's all about collecting information and notifying. And if we make it easy enough and people don't have to wait, I think people will do it. But if it takes time, they're not getting responses and it's complicated, people aren't going to do it. It's how it is. Yeah. Another question I have for all of you is, as you know, the task force is going to be making recommendations to the legislature and to DNR about foraging. What is maybe something you currently forage now? If you want to share some things that you currently forage now, and what is your hope that the task force will accomplish that you think would be beneficial for the state of Minnesota and foragers? And we may have non-foragers on here too. So if we do, feel free to also offer up any input or thoughts you have as well. Lise.
I want to reply actually a little bit to what you said earlier, and then I will also reply to your question. I'm not sure it is necessary, but you can decide to have people registering because they're taking people out on a plant walk to look at plants and maybe they taste a little bit and touch a leaf. I don't think that necessarily has to be registered. I mean, unless you're just so curious and you want to know what everybody in the plant world is doing. I think it's maybe more appropriate, more useful, I don't know, however you want to phrase it, to really stick to when the word forage by nature suggests harvest. Yeah. Okay. So you might want to consider that with what are you requesting that people let you know about. Okay. So that's one thing. Because again, as Leah said, so many people go out and look at plants in groups, but aren't intending to take much home or anything
You
really.
brought up a really good point. And that's something we kind of talked about too, is that are you just going there to view and with a group for educational purpose, but you're not actually foraging, or you're going with a group to educate, and through the education, you're also foraging or harvesting.
Correct.
And so you bring up a really good point as well. Okay. I will note that down too.
Okay. And then you had a question, what would be the hopes of what would come out of this? Again, for me, I really hope for education, for the foragers, that they understand about ethical harvest and taking care of the land in the process of harvesting, that this is about sustainability and again, whatever means to, that is really linked to the licensing or whatever you decide to do. That is my main concern because again, we have a lot of plants out there. We have a lot of greenery. We have a lot of fruit. It's a very generous land we live in, but people need to make, again, especially it's not just over harvesting, it's also, again, the trampling that I've noticed. I remember going to an elderberry shrub, and it's a place where I teach a lot, and people had clearly been there and it looked bad. And there was some left. They didn't harvest all of it, but it made me feel like if I was a person walking around Lake Nokomis, I would be annoyed. And we don't want to make people unhappy with foragers. Anyway, okay. That's
Thank you,
said
Lee.
my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen,
I'll just add, I think, yeah, some system of like notifying, especially if you're going to like state parks or places that you're more likely to run into a park employee or a ranger, notifying of larger groups, even if they're just educational. What I want to avoid is people out in a park excited to learn about foraging and plants, and maybe they're off trail, maybe they're picking some things, and they encounter a ranger, and the ranger, like, I don't like, this is also kind of like training on, the ranger side of like minimizing confrontation and using that as educational opportunity. But I don't want people to be like, oh, we got caught by the officer, we're all in trouble now. Now I'm afraid to go out and forage, or I'm afraid to leave the path because I might get in trouble. So yeah, I think anything we can do to like encourage people to not just be out in the park on the path, but interact with nature, touch it, feel it, smell it, taste it. Um, I feel like there's a big, even for myself, like I've been, threatened with citations for foraging in Three Rivers parks because there you can't even pick fruit or anything. And it doesn't feel good. And I'm a 6.5 foot tall white male. Like
Yeah.
there are other people who don't have the privilege of being, a confident, majority individual. And so I think, yeah, every person that has one of those negative experiences is just less likely to be out experiencing our parks and our state land. And it's one, like, every person that gets discouraged is a person who's then not advocating for the land and not out there, doing, generally, I feel foragers have probably the most positive impact on the land because we're pulling invasives, we're picking up trash, we live with the plants.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think anything that can reduce the risk of those confrontational interactions is definitely a positive.
Yeah. Thank you, Ellen. Anyone else? Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or if you aren't able to raise your hand but would like to speak, just go ahead and chime in. Hazel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hazel. I use she and they pronouns. I'm a community organizer for the BIPOC Outdoors Twin Cities group, and organize community events as well as education opportunities to familiarize our community to the great outdoors here in Minnesota. I jumped on a little late, so I've only heard a couple comments. I'm actually a friend of Alan's as well, so thanks, Alan, for inviting and sharing about this. But yeah, I am wondering if possible, before we do a permit system, if it would be possible to possibly do like a ambassador program where we can test the waters on having folks first educate others, because I share similar worries as Alan. Our community is already so vulnerable, and our BIPOC community, and so I mainly teach fishing for St. Paul Parks and Rec in our BIPOC community. And I've been approached like from other organizations like Wild Rivers Conservancy and whatnot, who, like we already have fishing licenses as requirements, but a lot of folks don't like going through the process of obtaining the right permits and licenses. And so they'll go out and as we know, fish are a source of food as well as foraging. And many people already struggle financially, especially in our communities. So they'll go out and fish and, forage. And so having a permit process, I worry, might just create a barrier that's unnecessary. And without there being like the right, let's say, like people to approach, not many people who visit state parks like, seeing individuals in uniform. I will say, because it could be an issue with like previous trauma. But yeah, so just kind of considering that. I know there's certain organizations that have ambassador programs, so people who are able to educate BIPOC communities who look like them, and kind of take away from the like white man in a uniform. And then are able to connect with the individual more, are able to ask like more personal questions. I think there's already so much like things that extract our data, so I don't feel necessarily too comfortable sharing more of my data. But yeah, those are just some thoughts, is like maybe creating an ambassador program, posting some training opportunities first, and then seeing how that goes. Because I think part of largely the issue that I've kind of seen in the foraging community is like there isn't enough education. And before we create another complex problem, maybe we just try addressing what we have first.
Yeah. Thank you, Hazel. I appreciate your comments and sharing your thoughts. Leah.
Well, first off, I love the idea of an ambassador program. I think last time when I shared at one of these listening sessions, I had shared like my vision of 5 years down the road, what that would look like. And an ambassador program, I believe I had wrapped into some of those visions and some of that conversation, right? Of like having a mentor that would be a well-trusted forager that would take people out, and you would have to perhaps go out with a forager before you could get a permit for the next year. Like that would just be an example. Or Liz had mentioned, like, what if there was a video that you needed to listen to about sustainable foraging and sustainable harvest before you were allowed to get a permit? DNR already has systems in place with little quizzes that you would have to take, like read through the foraging policy and take the little quiz, and you can't get your permit until you pass the quiz. Or, there's a lot of, I think, systems in place that we could utilize in order to ensure that there is some education that's wrapped in with the permit. Probably more ideas to be shared on that as well. Senator Fa, you had asked a question on specific species that we harvest, and then you had also asked, I believe, what we hope that could be accomplished by the task force. I think I had shared in my vision a lot of hopes that I think could be accomplished throughout the state. But knowing that the task force is ultimately providing recommendations and not actually accomplishing or implementing any of these things, I guess I could share a few of the ideas that I have that I would hope would fit into your recommendations. I know one of the things that has been tasked by you guys is to create a permitting system, like a low-cost permitting system, right? So that's definitely on the table to talk about. I think the scope of that, I had shared a little before, what would be the idea of getting a free permit if you volunteer an hour of your time to pull invasive species, or maybe it's more than an hour of your time. Pick a number that makes sense to you. having kids, youth be able to have a free permit, I think would be really important to be able to encourage kids to get outside. I think that would very much fall in lines with the values of DNR with their, No Kid Left Behind program, in really wanting to make sure that youth are getting out and interacting in public land. Whether that number of a youth is under 18 or under 15, I don't know, pick your favorite number. I think we heard a lot in the last listening session about the consistency with current permitting, that tribal members should not have to have a permit in order to forage, especially being that it's all treaty land in Minnesota. So I think consistent with wild rice harvesting, that should definitely be implemented. And now that I've brought up wild rice harvesting, another idea that I have would be, we have these systems in place already for wild rice harvesting that work well. As far as I can tell, as a wild rice harvester myself, the permitting system is pretty simple and easy to be able to go online. I can even do it on my mobile device and grab my permit. I can show up to a gas station and grab my permit on my way to the lake. But the permitting process for spruce boughs or for ginseng is very complicated, and you have to show up to a state forest office when it's sometimes open, sometimes on Monday through Friday, sometimes from 8 to 5, right? It's very not doable for a young professional like myself that works a 9 to 5 job Monday through Friday to be able to obtain that type of permit. So I'd love to see some of those pieces that are already in place wrapped into a foraging permit. Maybe that would be like with fishing, we have a trout stamp. Maybe you would get a wild rice stamp or a spruce bough stamp or a ginseng stamp or XYZ, name your favorite plant that needs to have some special restrictions on it. I think there's a process in place that DNR already has that could be modeled with a foraging permit. That would help land managers to get a little bit more information about wild rice, right? Or ginseng, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, when I get a wild rice permit every year, I get a snail mail. I don't get much snail mail, I will admit, as a young millennial, but I do always open this one, and it is a written survey that gets sent back to DNR about the quantity of rice that I've harvested. Who did I go out harvesting with? And a few different questions like that. And so I would love to see some sort of survey linked with a foraging permit. Like I said, I'm passionate about data, to be able to gather a little more data of who is out there, who is foraging, what are we foraging, what are we interested in? Are we mostly harvesting rotten black walnuts that are on the ground? Are we harvesting raspberries, like choke cherries? What are we harvesting? To actually answer the question then, leading into, you had asked about specific species. I have in my apothecary right now, I just inventoried during the Thanksgiving holiday, all of the species that I have in my apothecary shelf, and it is over 212 species. So I don't know that I could really list all of those for you here today, but there's a lot. Anywhere from nuts, such as hazelnuts, black walnuts, acorns, berries. I have dried choke cherries. I have dried June berries. I have sour cherries, and then a whole plethora of leaves and aerial parts of plants. I have roots and shoots and things like that as well. So I think there's a lot out there that as an intermediate forager, I have the diversity in my pantry. Not every forager is going to have that. They might have a couple of mushrooms. They might not have a, stockpile for their whole winter. So there's a spectrum, as I'm sure all of you know.
Thank you for sharing that. Over 200. Wow. I think maybe I have two. I'm happy with my two. Well, actually, I take it back, maybe four. Anyone else with thoughts?
This is Alan speaking. I was just going to hop on and say that Leah and I have another meeting that we need to hop off for. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Yeah, I'm watching I'm watching for the outcome of this, and I'm curious to see where everything ends up. So yeah, thank you for your time. I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll be seeing most of you in the future.
Thank you, Alan. We appreciate you coming to each of these. Thank you.
Can I say a few words?
Yes, Ningva.
Yes, well, thank
Oh,
you
actually,
for,
before he speak, I just want to say, Ningva is actually a really good friend of mine, and he has taught me a lot about foraging. A lot of the things I learned about foraging has come from this man. Don't let him fool you. He is an expert when it comes to plants. So,
yeah, well, thank you for inviting me to this program. Um, and also to put this program into, community that will, in the next future, people can be out there foraging. For myself, yes, I'm a hunter and I am a fisherman too. So every time I get out, I like to forage for mushrooms, for vegetables that I can pick and cook with the meat that I got. So, for example, there's watercress in the river that I can pick and cook with fish, something like that, or whatever. Some onion in the woods that I can pick and cook with my squirrel or my, turkey or whatever deer. Those things that we need. And, you know, I don't talking about picking the state park, but, in this, state, we had a lot of lands like the state forest and the wildlife management or whatever. Those lands are plenty, you know. So, well, just according to what I see here, it's not legal to pick anything. So, well, moving ahead, I'm really, really happy to have this program put it on to the DNR. So, whatever we out there, we can pick something and cook and eat. Like state of Wisconsin, well, they has a really good program in there too. So we are Minnesota. Well, things will just, do something like that, for example. Yeah, so yeah, that's all I had to say. But in my um, this country compared to what I love my country, this country is not anything that to be survive in the woods. We can't eat anything, but just a little place that we can still harvest and cook. So, thank you.
thank you, Nangva. And he brought up a really good point about Wisconsin. We did ask the Wisconsin DNR to come and talk to our task force group about their policies regarding harvesting or foraging. And they have a very different policy from us. They do not have the same restrictions as we do. They allow people to forage and harvest the plants that they need. And one of the questions that we asked them was, have you seen any real big problems or issues come out of the fact that you don't have a lot of restrictions or on people foraging plants? And their answer was no, they haven't seen any huge problem. They've always had it that way. They don't foresee changing it. And that was very interesting to kind of see the difference between states like ours and the states like Wisconsin, who's our neighbor, who have very different laws when it comes to harvesting and foraging. And one thing that was very much similar was that the state of Wisconsin have not done a very good job with data collection either. So even though they allow a lot of foraging on their lands and not restrictive, they have not invested in collection of data. And we don't have any data either. And so I think we restrict people from foraging out of fear that somehow we're going to be taking up all the resources, and that's not the case that Wisconsin have seen. So thank you. Anyone else with any thoughts? It could be to the question I asked, or it could be to any of the questions that Jennifer and Nick had put into the chat here as well. The questions are also listed there. Lise, and then Nibi, Nibi, I think that you don't have the hand option. So I'll go ahead and go to Nibi, and then I'll go to Lise.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I've really been thinking about our different types of land that we have in the state of Minnesota, and I keep hearing about the recreation area. And so I started thinking about that. So what does recreation mean? Just looking up the general definition of recreation in the dictionary, activity done for enjoyment when one is not working. So, pleasure, leisure, relaxation, fun, enjoyment, entertainment, refreshment, restoration. The list goes on to explain, recreation has many variances and variables to each individual. So, I started realizing I think I do some recreational foraging in terms of, I'm not an expert in any way, but I go out there for fun to learn about plants. I go out there for fun to relax and look at the plants. So I just wanted to make sure that we emphasize and highlight that those recreation areas are supposed to be there for everybody, So maybe we can take a look at that as being a valid way to recreate. And then the next thing I was thinking of is I serve as the chairwoman of Minnesota Parks and Trails Legacy Advisory. And I was at a meeting there where they were talking about they have a plan of planting 1 million trees. And I was like, oh my goodness, I love this. But we started talking about, well, what kind of trees and where are they going to go? And, that kind of planning. So I had suggested that they consider adding in fruiting trees. Let's start getting back to the traditional way of life of being able to go out and eat foods from our forests, the way that all of our ancestors survived at one time. Those are traditional foods and medicines that are a gift to us, to all people. And if this is public land, that means we should all be able to go out there and enjoy that. And then the other thing that I was thinking of is when I heard um, some of the elderberries and apples area look to be trampled, I think was the word that she used. What actually that says to me is that's data that people really desire that plant. I know a lot of people that ask me, do you know where any elderberries are? So and so's sick, and I would love to go out there and get them some elderberries. That means that people have a lost connection to that plant. So we should be utilizing our public lands in a way that provides more of what's desirable to the people. Like with the apple trees, a lot of the apples were gone because people have a love for apples and they're nutritious and they're good for us and they don't have land of their own to go and plant an apple tree, but they would, if they could, someday maybe they will. I mean, everyone's story is different. So I think what happens is they just go to the nearest area that's available to them. So that apple tree is a favorite spot. What that lets me know through data and looking at that observation, let's plant more apple trees for people to be able to, connect with the land in the way that it was meant to be before all of the urbanization. Everybody deserves to eat fresh foods from the earth, no matter where you live. So I just want to remind us that our children are desiring and yearning to be connected to the land and water. I see it all the time. And then the last thing I just wanted to say was that I'm so grateful for everybody coming tonight. It's an evening, it's after work, and for all of you to show up and give your input is so meaningful, and that lets us know how important that this really is. So thank you to everybody who has taken the time. Continue to write in your comments to Nick. That's what I had said today at the Minnesota Parks and Trails meeting. I was like, hey, you guys should come and join us and give your input or send us your comments. And it was amazing that a lot of people were very excited about it. They're like, oh my goodness, this is something that has been long needed. So I heard a lot of positive feedback. So I just wanted to share that good energy with you. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Navy. And I would volunteer to plant apple trees, but only if I could pick them later. And I'm one where I'm telling you the things I love to forage. I know many people talk about this, is that we want we care about those plants because we know that next year we're going to go back to that spot for that plant. We want it to thrive. And so everybody knows that I illegally forage Solomon seal. You know, that's something I love. And so when I am out and about, I will pick some Solomon seal. But the good thing is when I'm later on down in the fall, I will go back to those and I will help with when I'm in the area, I will help with just putting some dirt over picking some of the seeds and putting some dirt over it and hoping that those Solomon seals keep growing, because I need those when I go back. So,
That's an
um,
amazing point right there. In that education, that reminds me of my daughter. Every time she eats any kind of fruit, she saves all the seeds with good intention of, I'm going to plant more. I want to share this with my friends and family. So that mentality right there is traditional ecological knowledge. You
that's
know,
right.
you keep that cycle going in a good way. You keep those seeds and you bring them back and you plant them, or even sometimes nature does that. I can think of an area where we are harvesting our wild strawberries, and just with the kids running around having fun, playing and everything like that, those seeds naturally dispersed everywhere. So
Yeah.
the earth provides and is very abundant if we educate. So thank you for
Oh,
sharing that, if we just give back, I think that we can create that harmony and balance for all of us
that's
to be
right. And it,
sustainably connected to the land and water, the way we all lived prior to, modern restrictions. So we,
yeah,
we we remember that stuff. That's in all of us. It's in our DNA to live connected to the land and water. Thank
yeah.
you so much. I appreciate all of you.
And I actually remember hearing, I think it was one of our listening sessions where they were talking about a public partnership with the public to come and help manage the land, plant more on the land, and how much we can utilize the public to help us. And foragers, we be the first volunteers because we love plants and we want to take care of the land. Hazel and then Peter.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I actually just remembered too with my comment that I had made earlier is that I think I misstated that fishing licenses are needed in state parks, but I just like remembered and realized. So when I teach my fishing instruction classes with St. Paul Parks and Rec, most of the time people express like unable, they just don't feel safe going to like offices or gas stations to get their fishing license. And I always remembered that there's like very limited BIPOC owned shops too, like that offer like um fishing licenses where you can purchase with like a local BIPOC individual or owner. But one thing about state parks and fishing in the state parks too is that when I'm teaching my classes, most of the time I will share that the state parks don't require fishing licenses, and then even so that some state parks actually offer fishing kits. So if you don't have your own gear, you're able to go to the front door and or like the front office and ask for like a fishing kit, and it includes like a basic how to fish, includes like fishing poles and just education. And people usually, like, I've gotten comments of folks who are saying like that they've gone and used the resource and it connected them more so to the park, and then it encouraged them to then want to get their own fishing license to fish locally, which I think is like a good way, you know, like Nibby was saying, is like a good way. People want to be able to have these free experiences that don't have barriers, so then they can continue to try the recreational activity first before they can commit to it. So I think having, and I'm really strongly against having a permit system. I don't know if it's implemented, or if this process is entirely about pushing for permits, but I think if like I say, if we implement permits, it might cause some barriers. If we could try out a couple of things beforehand, that would be helpful. Because, like, I know for a fact, like when we hosted our BIPOC, we hosted a queer BIPOC retreat, maybe a year ago, and and then, you know, people wanted to forage and wanted to explore, and it wasn't to like bring home, you know, gallons worth of mushrooms. It was just to see and connect to the land. And so if there's these barriers put in place, it might discourage people, especially in vulnerable communities that already struggle with getting connected to the land, or feel that there aren't enough opportunities for them to connect to the land, because of like systematic barriers already put into place. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone, too, for joining and sharing, and it's been wonderful to hear, and learn as well. So I hope to continue to learn from you all.
Thank you, Hazel. And, you know, we have heard some similar concerns about having even a free permit system where it could be barriers to people as well. And so thank you for bringing that up as well. Thank you. Peter.
Yes, thank you so much, Hazel. And yeah, I mean, part of this discussion needs to include equity, for communities that don't own land, traditionally, for whatever reason, and these people should be able to take advantage of learning and connecting to the land in these ways. It's just so important, as far as I'm concerned. Um, what I also wanted to we've had some other people as part bring this up and on the task force, talking about regenerative foraging ideas that are, in education. So this is not just about sustainability, but it's about, you know, uh, creating those kind of permacultures. And I've been reading some very interesting things about that, uh, and how there's permaculture, um, areas around the United States that were created centuries ago, by our uh, indigenous uh, tribal people that still exist today, even though nobody's been taking care of. And that they were established because of the type of plants and fruits and nuts that are growing almost unnaturally together, so that somebody was intentional in doing that. That they brought these things together so that they would be in one place. And there's all kinds of opportunities, I think. It's really a matter of imagination. And we're talking about planting 1 million trees. And people right away talk about, oh, I'd love to, plant apple trees. There are so many kinds of fruit and nut trees that will thrive in Minnesota, and many of them are native, which apples are not. And and that there's opportunities to do this, and we just don't take advantage of it. But thank you again for everybody's uh, participation here. It's so important.
Crab
Thank you,
apples
Peter.
are actually native. The tiny little crab apples are the native plant.
Yeah,
Just to clarify.
that's the native ones. Yep. Yeah. The ones we normally eat though are they're
Mhm.
they're imports. So
Thank you, Peter. Gary.
Thank you, Senator. And yeah, everyone's had really good comments on the educational part of it. We do have the task force does have an educational category and outreach and so forth. And we've talked about certifying forage teachers and instructors, ambassadors. I love that term. And yeah, that's been talked about. I love Leah's idea about quiz or video before a permit. Yeah, we are talking about permits, but we're talking about free permits. I just had an email from Robin Greenfield. He's a forager. He's actually going to plan to forage a whole year without going to the grocery store or any other types of fast foods and so forth. So he's speaking in Minneapolis and St. Paul campus actually tomorrow night, but I think it's sold out. I think he's speaking in Faribault tonight. He couldn't join us tonight, but he did email me some recommendations. So I thought it would be kind of cool. I'll put his website in the chat, but I just wanted to mention some of his points that he wanted to mention. My recommendations on that foraging committee would be no permit is needed to forage in the state of Minnesota. And if a permit is created, then no permit is required for personal use, which includes trade, barter, gifting, in parentheses. And then the permit is only applicable for commercial use or over $15,000 per year. That's interesting. That's quite a big amount of money, but that was interesting that he mentioned that figure. No permit is required for small scale harvest of plants, mushrooms that fits in the cottage industry for sales. No permit is required for indigenous tribal members. Permits only protected critical or risk species, similar in parentheses, similar to how DNR puts hunting and fishing limits on specific species. That's interesting. Rather than specific quantity limits, adopt traditional, and this is in our language too, in the task force language of looking at personal use, traditional ecological knowledge and practices. I thought that was pretty interesting. One online permit for all plants foraged for personal use rather than individual permits for each plant and fungi. And then permit would be free. If money is collected for foraging permits, dedicate to investing in foraging resources. For example, wild rice license fees would go back to the account that helps support the manage the wild rice places in Minnesota. And then last, those involved in the creation of the rules are educated on foraging, both knowledge and practice, and most of us are on the committee. But anyway, I just wanted to review some of those topics that Robin emailed me tonight, and I'll interject his website in the chat. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, everyone.
Thank you, Gary, for sharing that. And, I think Robin hit on a lot of things that I've heard from the task force and other people as well. But those are some very good a suggestion and good input. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Gary, I can't believe his thing is sold out tomorrow. Maybe you could sneak us in the back door or something, since you know him.
Well, I don't know him, but I've been corresponding with him in the last few days. But I know I don't know if it is sold out, but I've heard it is sold out. But it's like
Uh-huh.
6:30 to 9:30, I think. Well, Peter, I think the Minnesota Mycological
yeah.
Society is behind that, right?
Yeah, he contacted me some weeks ago and wanted to know if we'd be interested in partnering for a presentation that he would give. And we thought, that a bunch of our members would be interested. And as it turned out, it was made open to the public, and it to say it was sold out, it was free. So I'm not saying it was sold out. Unfortunately, it's sponsored by the MMS and the Minnesota Foraging Alliance is the partners. Unfortunately, it's in a lecture hall in Borlaug Hall at the University of Minnesota, and unfortunately, the fire marshal says something about how many people we can jam in that room. And since we are guests of the University of Minnesota, we want to be very mindful with that we don't exceed the 178 people that are allowed to be in that room, and that's the biggest room in that building.
Mhm.
So as far as a lecture hall, so everybody, including Robin, was actually quite surprised that we had that it did fill up,
Mhm.
and that it did so quickly, because generally he says, well, not that, maybe I get about 80 people, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden there's more. We have a wait list. If you go on the uh, uh, to the Minnesota Mycological Society's webpage, there's a link to Ticket Taylor, and there's a wait list, and we've encouraged people who have figured out they can't make it
Mhm.
to at least um, let us know so we can open up some seats in the wait list. But
Peter, are you going to this?
yes,
Because I'm just thinking, what a great place to go and get input
Right.
for our
well,
task force.
exactly, kind of one of the reasons for this, and I've talked to Robin, as Gary has in the last few days, about that work of the task force and stuff like that, and what we've been working on. And yeah, I'm going to be doing some introductions and stuff, and I will be encouraging people to give input, and
Yay.
also try to get some direct input while
Yes.
when I'm visiting with people there as well.
Yes, please
And
let people
Alan's
know the work we're doing around foraging and our
uh,
foraging task force and how they can follow our work and give us input by emailing Nick. So yeah, that would be awesome.
Alan's going to be there and talking a little bit about Minnesota Foraging Alliance too.
Okay,
So,
fantastic. All right. Anyone else that's on here? Any thoughts? So we've got about 6 minutes left, and I want to just open up for any last thoughts.
Susan, it looks like Jennifer put in the chat. I think he is in Chaska the 13th. So let's see, that would be Saturday, I think, right? And there might be some more room there,
I
possibly.
I can speak to that as
Yes.
well. He is going to that. There is an event that I'm going to be that the MMS and myself are going to be at there. And actually Leah is going to be there and stuff. It's called the Forest Fair.
Mhm.
And S- Senator Pa, you've met Jamie Rockney, Chick of the Woods.
Yeah.
She's the organizer of the Forest Fair, and it's held at a greenhouse in Chaska. And
Ah.
there's going to be many people that are there. Uh, it's kind of a holiday fair for uh, you know, foraged, not strictly foraged, but natural products, forest, products from nature, whether it's, gifts for the holidays or other things. People like Sam Thayer are going to be there. Alan Burgo will be there.
Peter, is that open to the public? Is there a
It
limit on
is
how many
open,
people?
open to the public, and it's free.
And no limit,
So
right, on how many people can be there? Because I'm assuming.
I think they want more the merrier. I don't know how
Uh-huh.
crowded it's going to get, but hopefully it's going to be terribly cold. Now the greenhouses are heated, but if it's sunny,
Yeah.
it is quite the first year that they did it. It was a cold, sunny day,
Mhm.
and let me tell you, you spent all day in that greenhouse with the sun, and it was like such a boost of vitamin D. It made you feel like it was summer.
Yeah.
It just getting all that sunshine, in a warm place without having to be all bundled up was a wonderful thing. So
Please
yeah,
email me that information. I would love to go. I just want to go and pick people's brains is what I want to
yeah.
do. I want to go
Well,
there and ask them one
there's
question.
lots of opportunities would be to do that there, and like I say, we're going to have a table there, just making people aware of our stuff. But there's lots of great uh, products there as well as people there, talking about um, foraging and stuff like that. It's I don't know how many vendors there are this year, but it's quite a few, and it's free, open to the public, runs from 11 till 5,
Wonderful. Thank you for,
and there'll be some. I know they usually have a food truck there. I hope they bring more provisions than they have the last couple years because they've ran out of food. So we're
yeah.
maybe we'll have two food.
That,
Jamie works really hard to make this a success. So, and it's just a fun thing to get together with like-minded people uh in this, in the winter.
yeah.
You
Thank
can't
you.
go out and, you
Thank
know,
you, Peter. Anyone else? Any last thoughts before we end?
I have just one more. I
Yes.
think it was based off of a little bit of what Gary shared. I really liked kind of the permit process that Gary highlighted there about like the personal use and whatnot. Um, and one thought that came to mind, because I think someone mentioned earlier, like having an equity permit or something that's like free if there is a decision to charge for the permits, is that like right now, currently, there isn't. Um, so, like, most of the time when folks consider having like a specific group get like a like cost of like efficient or free like given like a freebie out in public, especially like with the DNR. Like for example, like in their social media when they post like, oh, certain protected or I don't know if it's specifically the DNR, maybe another organization, but like I've seen posts where they're like, okay, BIPOC, free for BIPOC. And then you'll go on there and like there's all these disgusting comments from people out in the community who are like pretty much trashing BIPOC community members and talking really badly about like quote unquote the opportunity to have this be more of an accessible or having a barrier taken out. So I think that's part of why I'm kind of against having a permit process is because then when you think of it later on, you'll want to offer, like, for example, like a free low cost or permit to the specific BIPOC community. And then when you publicize it, like we are subject to like violence or comments of hate. And it takes a toll on us as community members because to begin with, we didn't need to have a permit. We didn't need to have a cost associated with this. And now that there, for example, if there is a permit associated with it and you're taking into consideration reducing a barrier, it just opens us up to violence and comments of hate. So I just want to kind of just put that into perspective, throw that comment out there because I know it's something that like we see and talk about in our community groups when we're gathering. Also, Senator Susan, if you'd like to, we're actually having a BIPOC bonfire December 21st. So you're welcome to it. It's in St. Paul, so you can come and meet. I know there's not many BIPOC community members here at this meeting. We actually heard about it just today with Alan. So I did share the link with our group, but yeah, just to come get some more perspective because it is a comment that we're constantly always seeing is like permits are put in place and then we're given like free or barrier reducing, opportunities, but then we're subject to violence or hateful comments when in the beginning there wasn't even a permit to begin with, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining
It
it
does.
correctly,
It does
but
make
like
sense. I know
it's
what
like
you mean.
we shouldn't even be subject to that because there wasn't a barrier to begin with, but people misconstrue that, and obviously like we're subject to violence because of it. And I think that's partly why I'm super against having a permit to begin with, because there isn't one now. So yeah, sorry to go in a circle, but that's just another comment that I had, and wanted to make sure to voice and express with my full authentic self. But
Yeah, thank
yeah,
you.
of course. Yeah. But
Thank
yeah,
you,
you're
Hazel, for
welcome.
that. And I, as
Thank you so
someone
much.
who was a child of, grew up in the era where I grew up really poor, and so it grew up in the era of food stamps where you actually had the paper food stamp to go buy food, and then if you got free and reduced lunch, you had a different card than anybody else, and you had to wait in line at school for your meal, but your card was different, so everybody knew you were that kid who was on that free meal program. And so I know exactly what you mean about just some of the things that come with programs like that, and some of the hate that people get because they are receiving those free, um, I would say, exceptions, right? And so I hear you, and thank you for the invite. I do want to come because, again, I want to talk to people about foraging. So Hazel, if I could reach out to you, and you said that Ellen, Ellen, so I'm going to reach out to Ellen for your contact. I would
Sounds good.
love to come.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'll also just throw in my email if anyone wants to get connected.
Oh,
But
that would be great.
yeah,
If
that would
you
be
can, I'll take a screenshot, then that way I can contact you directly.
perfect. Sounds good. Look forward to it. Thank you again.
Thank you. Peter.
Just quickly, I didn't say as far as the forest fair, it is in Chaska at the Mustard Seed Garden Center. So just so people have where it is.
Thank
So
you.
thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for letting us go just a couple more minutes over our time. Thank you for joining us today and for all your great input and comments. We will be taking that back to the task force, and just have a great evening. This is a really great conversation.
So much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Miigwech Padamya, thank you.
Bye, Nivi. Bye, Gary. Gary, I
Bye.
like your backdrop, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It's a covered bridge.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Thank
cool.
Very
you.
nice. And for a minute there, I was looking at thinking, is that real or is that I just
Yeah, it's from Winterset, Iowa. One of the Madison County covered bridges. Pretty cool.
Very
Bridges
nice.
of Madison County. Yeah. Thanks.
Very nice.
Thank
See ya.
you,
Good
everyone.
night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lise.
Thank you.